The views of Ken's Coffee Shop do not necessarily reflect the views of Goose Pond Media or Cole County Entertainment. Ken's Coffee Shop is for entertainment purposes only.
Pull up a chair, let the cups clink soft. Little laugh in the corner, world talking on and off. Sip slow truth while the headlines drop. Welcome into Ken's Coffee Shop.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ken's Coffee Shop. It's me, it is Kenny B, and you are part of the coffee shop. We're thrilled to come to you today from the Goose Pond Studios South here in Maryland, and powered by Cole County Entertainment Network. It has a lot of great shows. Make sure you look for them on Facebook. You can see all their shows. I've got a lot of links to them on my Facebook as well. We do have a Facebook for this show called Seeking Truth on Facebook. You'll see my cute little face, well, the even better looking caricature of my face. If you want to follow us on Facebook, we would love that. You might ask, why isn't it called Ken's Coffee Shop? Simply because I did that before when I was in radio, and I used to get people that would call me and ask what hours we were open and whether we served latte, and we don't. Also, if you would like, you can email me at any time with anything you're thinking, thoughts for the show, or thoughts as to my mental stability at kennybseekingtruth@gmail.com. KENNYB seekingtruth@gmail.com. There's also, if you're watching us live here on the 15th of February, there is a comment box where you can leave your comments as we're doing the show, and I will try to respond to them. It's funny, it's 15th of February. Of course, yesterday was Valentine's Day. And when I used to do radio, I used to do my list of my 60 favorite love songs on Valentine's Day, and always ended with Nat King Cole's Unforgettable as the number one love song of all time. And then the next day, for equal time, according to the FCC, I would do my 60 best breakup songs. And my number one breakup song was Yesterday. And my kids, when I was telling them about the show, before I did the first radio show, said, well, that's not a breakup song. And I said, listen to the words, right? I don't know why, but she had to go. You know, all I dream is yesterday. So we don't have any music for you today, but it is the day after Valentine's Day. I hope you guys had a great Valentine's Day. I was looking on Facebook, and there was a thing where they were indicating Valentine messages for woke people. And the one I loved the most was, you must be universal health care because you make me feel so great. The idea of Ken's Coffee Shop is pretty simple. I have a lot of friends who are far right. I have a lot of friends who are far left. And there's about 3 of us left in this country who are actually in the middle. Most elections, I think, in this country get decided by the 5% of us who sit in the middle and don't know who we're voting for. Won't vote for somebody just because of their party affiliation. In my life, I probably voted 60% Republican, 40% Democrat. But in the townships and such where I lived, often the only candidate running was a Republican. So that skews it about 50-50. I voted for the current governor of Pennsylvania and the current Auditor General of Pennsylvania and the current Attorney General. So there's a party mix just there. We are thrilled to be part of this group called Cole County Entertainment. They got a lot of great shows. Make sure you check them out. We're also thrilled to be part of Goose Pond Productions. Goose and I go back to radio days, and you'll want to stick around because at 2:00 this afternoon, live from Goose Pond in Royersford, we have coming your way a little pre-show for the Daytona 500. So don't go anywhere when we're done. I am a lawyer. I am a comedian. I did stand-up comedy here in Ocean City for 3 straight summers. And I've gone as far as the state of Nevada to do comedy, not at Las Vegas, but Laughlin, which is the third largest casino city in Nevada. I also was a radio DJ and wrote for newspapers in Lehigh County for the East Penn Press. I wrote extensively for the Northwestern Press and the Parkland Press. I was lucky enough in my work career to do public work policy work in Washington. I saw the sausage being made. I saw political enemies were really friends. My congressman at the time, Charlie Dent, who I got to know pretty well, he had roommates because a lot of members of Congress just rent an apartment in Washington and they leave their families back in their home cities. And his apartment was bipartisan. And that was the way things used to work. Most of my life was spent in Pennsylvania. And that's where Democrats are more conservative than national average, and Republicans are more liberal than national average. To paraphrase Barack Obama, Pennsylvania is all about gods, guns, and Yingling. We once had an election, which was an unusual one in this country, where our right-to-life Democratic governor, a man, was running against a right-to-choose Republican lady. And that's not very common, but it's the type of things we see in Pennsylvania. I think that's what really has helped to mold my political views. I consider myself a moderate. I am an independent. I've been a registered independent since 2011, when I very publicly on my radio show switched my registration from Republican to independent because our county chairman in Lehigh County, grew up in Lackawanna, but in Lehigh County, our Right to Life chairman, our Republican chairman, was a bigot, basically. He posted some bigoted comments on New Year's Day of that year. And as a result, what I did is I said, hey, I'm leaving this party because they would not censure him for his comments. I hate hypocrisy. I have some friends on Facebook. Hopefully Gary Bowman will watch this at some point in time, and a few others. So I'm always calling out on the hypocrisy that things are different now every time the party in power changes. The tagline of this show, and it's very meaningful, is I can lead you to truth, but I cannot make you believe it. The only politician that seems to align with me is Senator Fetterman. And it took a stroke for that to happen. And Fetterman is all that is wrong with the American two-party system. No, not him, but the fact that he will never, ever get elected again in Pennsylvania because it'll be impossible for him to win a primary. He would do very well in the general election because people on both sides see his truth, his well-reasoned opinions on things, his pragmatic approach to actually governing, but he's never going to win a primary. 2028 is almost certainly going to give us candidates that are too far right or too far left for our liking, because the primary system engenders that you have to go far to the extremes to win the primaries. And that's something that we're going to have to work with in this country. Until 1972, for those of you who are a bit younger than me, and I've been following politics since Richard Nixon and Hubert Horatio Humphrey in 1968 at the tender age of 11. And until 1972, you could never get the nomination through the primaries. It took more delegates to get the nomination than were available in the primaries. Many states didn't have primaries. Many states did not have binding primaries. And many states had favorite son candidates who came to the convention uncommitted. And we ended up getting candidates who were not as far to one side or the other. There's a recent miniseries I recommend to you, and I don't remember the title, but it was on James Garfield. I believe it was on Netflix. And it dealt with his rise to the presidency and then ultimately his assassination. But Garfield went to the convention, and he actually gave the nominating speech for another candidate. But when the convention deadlocked, they turned to Garfield. You know, in 2016, Donald Trump played the system perfectly. A majority of Republicans in 2016 voted against Donald Trump in the primaries, but the Republicans used the winner take all in many states, and Trump was able to put together a plurality. He was the winner. He had a majority, but he had more votes than anybody else. And he was able to do that because of a divided opposition. Our country today is terribly divided. And it doesn't matter whether you're left or right, your feelings are stronger than they've ever been. And this did not start with MAGA. It did not start with Donald Trump. It didn't even start with the Tea Party. This goes back to the Gingrich government shutdown, where the only one who made out on that was Bill Clinton, and with his relationship with Monica Lewinsky, and the subsequent impeachment. Until then, and I was working in Washington at the time, doing tax policy, lobbying, if you will, Congress actually operated efficiently until then. They actually had matters come up to a vote. You actually were able to get things voted on in the Senate. There was this concept of key votes, where if something was declared to be a key vote, you had to follow party lines, you had to follow the party whip, or you knew you were going to be in trouble in the next primaries. But then it would happen 3 or 4 votes a year might be key votes. Other than that, members were able to vote their conscience. Unfortunately, I'm reading a little note here, but unfortunately, as we've gone on, it's become more and more a case of every vote is a key vote. So that on everything that comes up, you have every Democrat voting one way, every Republican voting one way. Occasionally, if the outcome is not in doubt, you'll see a few switch because they're freed up by the party whip to vote the other side so they can win a purple election the next time up. I think we saw that recently with some of the votes on the continuing resolutions to keep the government open. But we've stopped getting things done because everything that comes up in the Senate these days is subject to filibuster, subject to the fact that you continue to debate until a cloture vote is held. And when that happens, you need those 60 votes in order to stop debate. So everything that comes up now, people are constantly saying we should get rid of the filibuster. And I can tell you right now, that's never going to happen. And hopefully it never happens. Because if we didn't have a filibuster, we would have enacted ACA under Obama. We would have repealed it under Trump. We would have enacted it under Biden, and we would have repealed it again under Trump. There is some good in the fact that you do need some bipartisan support to get anything done in Congress. And the funny thing is, it worked pretty well for 200 years. The last 20 or 30 years haven't been as good. So what we want to do in this show is we want to go beyond the headlines, but we want to get you out of your echo chamber. Because one thing I see, and I belong to a lot of political groups on Facebook, one thing I see constantly is the group is made up of everybody who supports a certain position. I remember this one group called Blue Sky. Everything is as far left as you can get. And there are some Republican far-right groups out there as well. And you know what? If everybody's agreeing with everything that they've always said, it does 2 things. 1, it doesn't ever make you see the other side. And 2, it makes you even more convinced that everybody believes in you. I see posts these days talking about how everybody is against Donald Trump. And then I go to the right and I see how everybody supports him. And in fact, I don't think the vote has changed all that much. If the vote were held today, I don't think there's that many people who would actually change their vote from 2024. And I think that's because, well, he's basically done what he told us he was going to do. So the Republicans love him. Democrats hate him. He's a jerk. He's an asshole. He doesn't do things the way world leaders tend to. World leaders don't tend to call each other names and things like that. But I don't think people care anymore. It's, when I was working in corporate America, we got evaluated on the what and the how, what we did and how we did it. These days in politics, it's the what. Nobody cares about the how. I worked for a newspaper. I would write stories. I was a reporter. I was not a journalist. The difference being Nobody wanted to know what my opinions were. I just reported the news. And I would send in my stories and I would wait for the paper to come out. And we'll always wonder what the headline was going to be because it was the editor who wrote the headlines. And she decided what was important. A lot of times I'd look at it and say, is that really what my story was about? So make sure when you were reading the newspaper, when you're reading online newspaper, because there is no such thing as people that read that newspaper anymore. I don't know what we put under bird cages. But when you are reading the paper, go beyond the headline. It reminds me of a story. It was the day that Donald Trump was actually out on a boat with the Pope. I think it was one of those G30 meetings or one of those things in Italy. They were on Lake Como. The Pope's got his little Pope hat on. Wind blows the Pope's hat off of him. And it's there in the middle of the lake. Trump stands up, walks over the lake on the water, picks up the hat, walks back to the boat, and gives it to the Pope. And then the next day, the headlines on the New York Post, it was Trump saves Pope's hat. Daily Mail, Pope is God. CNN had Trump playing on the lake when he should be working. And USA Today, Trump can't swim. And you know what? That's exactly how it would happen. Go find any story that all the media cover and see how different those headlines are. See the weasel words they use, the allegedlys, it may, this may cause this, may cause that. And just remember, if everyone agrees with you on Facebook, you're probably picking the wrong sites. Now let's get into our first topic for today, after that long introduction. And that was something that happened a week ago today, a great mismatch of talent and strength. I mean, it was a blowout. No, I'm not talking about that football game. I'm talking about halftime show. Talking about Bad Bunny versus the Turning Point halftime show. You know what? I've heard a lot of people say, hey, it's America. You should sing American because we can't have foreign music in this country. And I used to do a show with the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it reminded me of things like The Singing Nun, Dominique, made #1, all in Belgian French. La Vie en Rosa by Edith Piaf, all in French. Do you remember Aries 2 from, I think it was the 1970s? It's in Spanish. And we were all dancing the Macarena to a song that was also all in Spanish. Heck, the 1990 World Cup made Nessun Dorma famous. I mean, if you think you should only sing American in America, don't ever go to the opera. And maybe the best example, back in 1961, there was a song by an artist out of Japan. The song title translates to, I look up as I walk. Well, for some reason, we took that Japanese title and we changed it to sukiyaki, which is a beef dish. Sukiyaki doesn't appear anywhere in the song. It has nothing to do with the song, but people thought it would sound more Spanish or more Japanese if we called it sukiyaki rather than calling it I look up as I walk. And you know what? If you want songs that you can have in English, that you understand the English, never listen to Louis Lai or In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. Maybe, just maybe, Bad Bunny could have made people happy, especially in my home state of Pennsylvania, if he had done La Baile de Pollo or the chicken dance. Can you imagine the chicken dance in Spanish? You know, there's another old story. I feel like Ronald Reagan when I tell my old stories, but there's an old saying that if you speak 2 languages, you are bilingual. If you speak 3 languages, you are trilingual. If you speak 4 languages or more, you are multilingual. And if you speak 1 language, you are American. And it was my experience. I lived in Europe for 3 years and worked there, traveling from time to time, probably for 15. And my experience was very much in keeping with this American exceptionalism where we think the whole world should do things our way. We think the whole world should speak our way. And yeah, there's some racism involved in the Bad Bunny commentary, but there's also a lot of this. Everybody should speak English. Americans in America should speak English. And French people in France should speak English if they're talking to us. If we go to an island in the Caribbean, they better speak English. And I would go into meetings in Spain. There'd be 15 people in a conference room all night long. And they would feel compelled to speak English, even though I was the only person in that room who did not speak Spanish. I was the only person in that room who didn't speak multiple languages. The person on the other side, it was an interesting man by the name of Juan Miguel Villarmir. He did something I've never seen done before. I'm sure there's professional translators that can do it. But he would sit in a meeting and he would answer somebody in whatever language they spoke to him in. So one guy was speaking to him in French. He'd answer in French. A lot of people were speaking in Spanish. He'd answer in Spanish. I was speaking English, of course. He'd answer in English. My boss was speaking Italian. He would respond to him in Italian. That's the way the rest of the world is. But here in America, everybody better be speaking English. And of course, yeah, our ancestors did come to this country, and most of them learned English. I had a grandfather and his brothers who came here from Italy. I only knew my Uncle John, which was one of his brothers. Occasionally, Uncle John would try to speak Italian. And my grandfather was really having none of that because he had become so Americanized that he didn't want to continue to speak Italian. Now, I'm not sure that's the right thing. I come most recently from the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, where we have about 16 groundhog lodges, Grunsaw lodges. And every year for the groundhog dinners, because Groundhog Day is actually a big source of German American pride, every year for the dinner, they do it only in Pennsylvania German. And you are fined if you speak English. Other than me, they gave me a pass because they knew I couldn't speak anything else. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with retaining your heredity, your heritage, nothing wrong with retaining the language of your ancestors, as long as you can speak both of them. And I firmly believe that. And, there's some people that are saying, hey, we should have got an American to do the show. And then you start wondering about what's wrong with our American educational system. Because, something? People from Puerto Rico, they're American. They are American citizens. And I had somebody debating on Facebook saying, oh, no, they're not citizens because they can't vote in presidential elections. Okay. Well, you know what? If I move to Puerto Rico and become a Puerto Rican resident, I'm not voting in presidential election anyway. Not because I'm not a citizen, but because Puerto Rico isn't allocated any electoral votes. But Bad Bunny is an American citizen. He is American. And, I'm not really sure where all this stuff came from that we should only have Americans doing the halftime show. Would we really have turned down the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, ABBA? Even today, would we object if Adele did the show because she's not American? I mean, maybe we don't like the music. I mean, I didn't watch the show because I don't like Bad Bunny's music. It's not my style of music. I'm 60s, 70s, 80s and country. He didn't quite meet that demographic. But I have no problem if the show was in Spanish. One other issue for today, and that is we got a government shutdown issue once again. For some reason, like I said at the beginning, Congress can't do its job anymore and pass a budget that's going to cover a full term and pass the spending resolutions necessary. So every time we go through these continuing resolutions, and every time we end up playing fire with shutting down the government or parts of the government. Every time the administration changes, your view of a government shutdown changes. For the let's go back to Barack Obama. If you were a Republican, you were in favor of government shutdowns because it was the only way for Congress to exercise any authority. If you were a Democrat, you hated them. You switched views when Trump became president. And then when Biden became president, you switched again. And now we've switched again. If you're a Republican, government shutdowns are terrible. Congress should be doing its job. And if you're a Democrat, it's the only way we can get heard. We know that we can't do anything in the House. So the only way we can stop these things is by holding firm in the Senate until we get some of what we want. And of course, this time, what they want is to reform ICE and improve ICE. And I watched a video a couple of days ago that was talking. I thought it was very informative. The ways to avoid getting killed by ICE. First one is, if you're driving a vehicle, don't drive it anywhere in the direction of somebody, or else they might think that you're going to run them over. And in those situations, you don't have a lot of time to react. You're just going to think, oh my God, it's coming at me, even if in slow motion, you can see it slowly turning away. Don't bring a loaded firearm and extra magazines to a protest. It starts creating the idea that you don't think it's going to be a friendly protest. And don't bring up the story of vigilantes who've gone to protests and shot people and gotten off with it because they've gone to violent protests, brought a weapon with them, and were acting utterly in self-defense. Here we have what we thought were peaceful protests. Don't fight with armed law enforcement. Never works out very well. They have guns that are better and stronger than yours. And don't forget, they're wearing body armor. So even if you are an equal marksman with them, chances are they're going to win. And don't destroy property. Once you start destroying property, especially government property, you raise the stakes. But there's also ways we can improve ICE. And one of those ways is local law enforcement, instead of avoiding them, needs to work with them. Local law enforcement should be responsible for crowd control. You shouldn't have ICE agents doing a lot of the work they were doing because the local governments didn't want to get involved. And ICE should focus on areas where there is a known issue. I know we have the whole Somali thing in Minnesota, but there's no indication they were going after Somalis in Minnesota. And that was never seen as a hotbed of illegal immigration. Go to the areas where it's a problem. But also, folks, remember, ICE enforces the law. If you don't like the law, you have to change it. It's not easy to change it, but you don't go changing a law simply by saying that your government should not enforce it. Because, whether you like it or not, it is the constitutional responsibility of the president to enforce our immigration laws. And that's why millions of people were deported under George W. Bush, under Barack Obama, under Joe Biden, and under Donald Trump, because it's the law. It's what you have to do. And I know there are a lot of asylum seekers that come to this country, and we feel sorry for them. But I actually was lucky enough when I was in law school to work on an asylum project and to do a lot of work on my law review on asylum. And one of the things I can tell you is most people who come here to this country don't come here and qualify for asylum, because you need to have a fear of persecution that's based upon your race, religion, gender, political views, etc. A fear of persecution, not my country's violent and I'm going to be caught in the crossfire, or my country's poor and I can't afford to eat. You need a fear of persecution. And most people who come here on a prima facie basis fail the asylum test. And that's why they're denied asylum and why they need to go back. And it's important that we start realizing the immigration issue and the illegal immigration issue are two different things. I'm all for immigration. My ancestors were immigrants. Every country has immigration laws. Most of them have quotas where you try to allow certain people into your country certain skills, and you don't allow others. You have quotas that are based upon skill, based upon area of origin and the like. And that's immigration. I'm all for immigration, for measured immigration, for letting into this country the people whose skills we need. When I spent 3 years working in England, I had to get working papers in England, and I had to prove to them that I was doing something that no English person could do, which was keep my teeth straight. They can't do that at all. Now, and that's what you had to do, and that's what you have to do in every country. So it's time that we start having the right debate in this country. It's not that we are anti-immigrant. It's not that we are racist, that we're against people that are coming from the South, but we are against illegal immigration because unfortunately what happens is too many people come in and they don't have the right skills that we want. So folks, we had a long introduction today. We got into a couple of topics. This is going to be a frequent show that we're going to have. We got some more topics coming up next time. We'll get into the Epstein files and the SAVE Act. We will get into data centers, as we have a comment on. We will get into a lot of things that we didn't get to today. And I look forward to seeing you next time here on Ken's Coffee Shop. Until then, we will keep the coffee brewing. Goodbye, everybody. And remember, I can lead you to the truth, but I can't make you believe it. Thank you.